Anyway, my name's Kevin. I'm the Executive Director of Winter Wheat Ministries. We are a 501c3 in process, so we don't have our official tax ID yet, but anyway, we're basically a ministry center of innovation, and our purpose is to strengthen the role and influence of the global church. Everything we do is focus on two things: faith engagement and faith leadership. Every project that we take on basically, has to tie in with either of those two strategic initiatives. And so today, I spoke on Thursday. I think some of you weren't here for that, but I was talking about a couple of our pilot projects that we have underway. And so basically, my wife and I have converted our house into it's like this awesome place for kids. So it's a game design studio. We got these really sweet gaming computers, and anyway, we run design workshops every day of the week, 7 days a week. We're open from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. And we've got roughly about 50 kids in the community that participate. But anyway, the two projects are: we're building 100 Cities of the Bible in Minecraft. We're taking satellite images of the Earth, converting those into the Minecraft format. And so the purpose of that is it's a missional project, obviously, but anyway, we're involved with churches from all over the country, and so hopefully we'll be able to take that game world and connect it with church ministry programs and different things like that for educational purposes, and then also into other countries, particularly with closed access mission countries. So Pakistan, Iran, Syria, Afghanistan, North Korea, and China are the 6 countries that we're looking at. The second pilot project is with Legos, and so kids that participate in our program, they can choose one or the other, but they can basically develop real shrink-wrap, off-the-shelf products that are Bible story kits. And so our goal with that project, and again, they're separate, but they're interrelated in terms of its core purpose. But the kids that participate in the Lego project are basically, learning some engineering concepts in terms of product development and life cycle management and kind of the whole process from conception to operation. And so we're kind of incorporating legitimate learning concepts and application of how kids can start to develop those skills. And so anyway, the goal for that project is mainly international, but we're also looking at supporting local church missionaries. So let's say you attend a church, maybe your church has 5 different missionary families, and your church is financially supporting those families. So what our goal is that our Center of Innovation would be a strategic partner with your local church, and if you wanted to support your missionaries, we would work with you on helping you raise money to basically purchase, let's say, 25 story kits for the Book of John, or maybe you might want to look at, I don't know, maybe you want the Old Testament books. And so that's kind of what our program is doing. Is we're developing, essentially Bible story in Legos that represent the various books of the Bible. So anyway, so today's session is, is we're talking about innovation. I like to kind of emphasize purposeful innovation, because there's lots of different theories about what innovation is and what it isn't, how it really applies, and so that's kind of what we wanted to spend some time talking about today. I am curious though, does anyone work for a company that has an innovation department? We have
innovation days.
You have innovation days, okay. And what does that consist of? Is it like a once-a-year thing? Is it kind of...
They're trying to do it as a once a quarter. It's actually 2 days now, where you put forward an idea and work on it for 2 days, and then show it amongst the rest of them. Okay. And does the good ones will be implemented in the product.
And is that corporate-wide, or is it within a department?
It is company-wide.
Okay. Does it tend to be technically centered?
Yes.
Okay.
Like, it's usually centered around adding a feature to a product.
Gotcha. Okay. Anybody else? So everybody else in here then would be either small business, entrepreneurs. Does that sound right? Okay. So yeah, I come from the enterprise world, and so I've left my 21-year career in IT. I was an enterprise architect before I started the ministry innovation center, but a lot of my experience is around developing high-value programs pertaining to strategic outcomes. So the last company that I worked with, which was 11 years, I was there for 11 years, St. Louis Health System in Boise. It's the only nonprofit, privately owned health system in Idaho. And there aren't very many left in the country. Most of them are conglomerated. They're owned by for-profit entities, even though the hospital itself might be nonprofit. Anyway, my point is that innovation is a huge buzzword. Everybody talks about innovation. Another thing is that I've realized that transformation is often equated almost interchangeably. They use it interchangeably with the word innovation. So now at our organization, we didn't have a chief innovation officer. We had a chief transformation officer. So it's kind of interesting that the whole lingo and the way that terminology is used to kind of represent an organization's strategic vision and mission. I find it extremely ironic that within the church we talk about transformation, but we don't talk about innovation. So I find that really peculiar. And so part of what kind of led me down this road of launching a center of innovation, a ministry center of innovation, is that innovation centers are usually purposed with problem solving. They're trying to position their organization to be a leading competitor in their market, they want to blow their competition away by solving the most compelling problems in their industry. And so I've been kind of following this whole genre of what innovation is and all those things, but for several years. But I've really started to believe that I think that's one of the things that's missing within the church is we actually need to incorporate innovation thinking in a prescriptive way, which is why I call it purposeful innovation, so that we can solve the most compelling problems facing the global church. I mean, think about it. What would be, on Thursday I asked the question, what are the top 3 challenges facing your local church? What keeps your pastor awake at night? And so I think it kind of ties in with this whole notion of applying innovation for problem solving to accelerate the position and role, the influential role of the church in society. So that kind of gives you a little bit of context in terms of what we're going to be talking about today. So. Excuse me. I think I should have got some water. Okay, so let's just kind of talk about what innovation is. Maybe I'll start with this question. If I were to ask you, hey, I have this idea, and it's a new invention. What am I trying to say? What would be the difference between invention and innovation? Is there a difference? Yes?
Well, I feel like sometimes you can make an invention out of even just improving something that already exists. You don't have to necessarily have something innovative and totally new and different for it to be an invention. You can just improve on something.
Okay.
Like if I made a better word processor because I was upset with the current word processors, that wouldn't make me innovative so much as I noticed problems and I figured out a better solution. If I made an entirely different program, like say I was the first person to invent a slideshow program, that would be innovation.
Okay.
If that makes any sense. It is kind of a fuzzy
Anybody
line.
else?
I'm using your same argument, but essentially the opposite. I read it the other way.
Which is
Innovation seems iterative.
what? Okay.
It is kind of a fuzzy line.
Can you have an invention that isn't innovative?
Well, that might be an expression of an idea that already exists that just hasn't taken that transformation, but...
I mean, this is the... well, I'm sorry.
So I can't think of one.
This is part of the dilemma in the industry. It's why there's a lot of confusion about, well, yeah, we have this innovation department. And so all of a sudden, this group, this department is now responsible for innovation, right? It's like, well, what about the rest of the company?
Invention sometimes has like copyright and legal. Innovation might just mean change, whereas invention sometimes has like ramifications in the courts. So that might be a wiggle room between the two.
But you kind of thinking through, yeah.
Invention kind of has a thought that something has been created that isn't necessarily already existing, but innovation can take existing things and just use them in a new way.
Okay. I think it's these are probing questions. I'm trying to get you, thinking about where these issues fit into the broader picture, not only for your business or your job, but also from the perspective of the church. Another question is, does innovation start and finish? Does it have a beginning and an end, like a project does? Projects can't be a project unless they have a start and an end, right? And you have projects that go on, and they're supposed to finish, but by definition, it really should have a beginning and end if it's a project. Yeah.
One more thing that came to mind is innovation tends to be, I think of it as a process.
Okay.
So you could have an ongoing process, but inventions tend to maybe be specific things that the process creates as artifacts.
Okay.
And then you can innovate your process. If you're a process engineer.
That is a true statement. Yeah.
I kind of feel like, I think everybody here's made a really great point. I mean, when I was even saying what I thought, I wasn't totally sure if what I was saying would hold up. But I think specifically, I think it's going to vary where you're saying, like you mentioned companies and innovation departments specifically. Right. I think in that specific circumstance, my argument of, well, innovation is something totally new. Well, like if I imagined an innovation company and say a television studio, versus the rest of the company, I imagine the innovation department makes an effort of finding new properties, while the rest focuses on producing episodes of existing things, maybe getting licenses for existing things. That difference in that situation, but it really varies. Yeah.
Well, I struggled with whether or not we were going to call our lab a ministry center of innovation. But the fact is, it's just one of those things where at some point people have to understand. There has to be some level of understanding for them to kind of come behind what you're doing, right? So I think trying to balance the using familiarity in terms that language that people can get.
It sounds cool.
Okay, and then kind of balancing. Yeah, I mean we're not saying that innovation can only happen because it's a lab, right? Now I've taken the view that inventions do not have to be valuable. You can have something that's an invention. No one has ever created it before, and it works, it's totally functional, but if it doesn't add value, so innovation, I believe, in the way that I've approached the whole philosophy and theory around innovation is that it has to be an outward expression of value. I can do things inside, right? I can take things in and my knowledge and gain my skills, but if I'm not using those skills, that's turning outwardly to create value for other people, then I personally don't include that as part of my definition of innovation. Because for me, it doesn't fit with our mission. So again, the parallel to the church, dude, this is where it's at. We have got to be thinking in the context of innovation as we imagine just this, it's a constant flow. We hear, we go to church, we hear the gospel through lessons and Bible studies and relationships, right? But it's that outward expression of value. Where do we replace that with? Faith engagement, discipleship, the spiritual enrichment, spiritual transformation. That's what I'm talking about, is that outward expression. And so from that standpoint, hopefully that's making sense. Another one is kind of going back to the invention thing. Does anybody have a guess as to what logo or icon or visual image represents innovation?
Light bulb.
Light bulb. Well, that's the same one that represents invention. And so, it's really fascinating to kind of see. So I intentionally did not choose a light bulb, but I think it's a point to be, considerate of and just aware of it. The way we think in society is that, we're still trying to figure out what is innovation, how does it work, what does it look like, what does it feel like, and so I came across, and I didn't include the reference here, and I can get to if you want, but this is kind of a long-standing metaphor of how to understand innovation. I think it's a really useful way to think about it. But surfing, the art of surfing, you have kind of these three elements, and so I thought I'd just run through those real quick here, and so we can talk about it. So the wave, think about the wave. A lot of energy and force, right? You can't control it. Comes from the sea, disruptive things in the sea, whether it's wind, maybe an earthquake, gravity, the moon cycles. But we can't keep it, we can't create it, we can't stop it from happening. It just happens, right? Out of these disruptive forces. I think when we look at like maybe a science lab, they can manufacture a wave system, but it's never going to be the same. You're not going to go surf in MIT's science lab where they have the earthquake testing system. Create, what I'm talking about, the thing that creates the waves. They can do the measures, and so yeah, we can manufacture it in that way, but it's not really the same. And then there's Wavelock, which is the surf. They make these maybe you've seen them on cruise boats, cruise ships. They're like surfing machines. It's like a persistent wave. Anyway, so yeah, it doesn't quite capture that natural essence of it. But anyway, the wave itself basically symbolizes the will of the people. It's the market demand that exists for so like let's say, the social demand for a particular product or market segment. Okay, that would be the wave forming as it's crashing, and then there's an end to it. It finishes out and it's done. And there's another one coming. Okay, so it's just constantly coming in, but it's like the will of the people. That's where you get the buying and selling of products. The sea is the people. It's the human beings that kind of generate this. You can't control the sea, but they kind of generate this force of energy. Is that making sense, kind of? So anyway, so the similarity then back to innovation is that, well, you can't really control innovation, but we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Again, this is a theory, so you can accept it or reject it if you have a different view of it. But one of the things about this idea of whether we can control the sea or human beings, society, is that we can send somebody to the moon, but we can't predict the economic crisis. So how do you reconcile that? Well, people are more complex than a rocket, and that's just kind of the reality. You can't. Yes, we can predictably create mechanical objects to complete a task, but society is much larger, it's more complex, all the things that come into play there. So in that sense, as with innovation, there really isn't a good way to control innovation itself. But let's go to the next one. So the surfer. A surfer, even though we can't control the sea, we can ride the wave. Okay? And so now, you look at a surfer, we can ride a wave if we totally suck at surfing. Maybe we've never done it before. and we're falling all over the place. We can still try to ride it, and it gives us the opportunity to do that. But if we're really good at it, well, it's going to be awesome, and people are going to appreciate it, and they're going to, maybe we'll enter competitions, and we'll be, you know, doing all this awesome stuff as a surfer. But anyway, that's kind of the next stage of it, is, you know, thinking about, you know, the surfer being able to consume the product or the wave. He's able to kind of harness the energy of the sea that's forming this wave. Yeah, the other thing is that no matter how good the wave is, it's not going to make a poor surfer better. That's something they have to figure out. They got to practice. They got to, you know, train. You know, conditioning. So the surfer would be, you know, the equivalent of like an entrepreneur. You know, the wave, like I said, is the market demand. Now the maneuvers of the surfer, that's the product. That's the products and services that they're selling. Okay? So, has anybody ever surfed? I've done it. And it was a disaster. I almost drowned, really. I really did. But I remember sitting out on my board, you know, and I was in the 5th grade. I was trying to, because I lived in Santa Cruz. I was trying to straddle up with the board. In fact, the board I had was about like that. And that wasn't easy. But anyway, we're sitting out there waiting for this wave to come. We're just sitting out there. So imagine, no matter how good of a surfer I was, which I wasn't, but if I were, I still would have been sitting there. Right? So there's nothing you can do if there's no waves. So when you think about innovation, whether it's with game design, the projects you're doing, ministry initiatives you're trying to do, you got to be with the wave to make something happen. Otherwise, you know, there's not much activity. Doesn't matter what your skill sets are. So, you know, I think that's an important point. And then the beach. So the beach, think of this as the environment that creates character to your product, to the wave. Not your product, to the wave. So you know, some beaches are crowded. Some beaches they're like deserted beaches, and you know, you might talk to a surfer and they're like, wow, I surfed at this beach, nobody was around, it was awesome. Nobody really got to experience that with them, right? Because nobody's around. So, you know, there's a lot of risk to that. If you're going to go to a beach that no one's ever surfed before, well, one, you might get lost trying to get there. The travel expenses may not necessarily be predictable. So you might be spending more money trying to find this place. You drive around looking for it, going all over the country. The third one is, what happens if something bad happens? Who's going to help you, or you know, issue you know, medical attention? And so you're out by yourself, and so yeah, there's a lot of risk, and most people don't go that path. They're going to choose the crowded beaches to surf. Right? It's proven, people know it's got a reputation, it's got credibility. What they try to innovate on is their maneuvers. And that's kind of that's where you know, when we talk about purposeful innovation or prescriptive innovation, that's kind of what we're trying to talk about. Is just because we're taking a risk or doing something new doesn't really do much unless it's something that can be shared with others. Is that making sense? Any thoughts or questions or disagreements? So, to predict innovation, it requires really 3 things. You've got to have the perfect wave. You have to have awesome surfing abilities, and you have to have the ideal beach, you know, environment, the design of the beach. all those three factors together is where you see in business, technology, any industry. That's where you see the Apples of the world, whoever it is, whoever the example is that you prefer. It really isn't. Some of it's just it just happens, but you have to be prepared to seize that moment, and that's where you start to see innovation in a way that's. I think maybe we can't control it, but I think there's a way to be better prepared so that you're ready to act. And that's kind of where I fall in. I like that approach. I'm okay with that. I'm okay that we can't predict it every time. Maybe you don't want to predict it. Maybe it's okay that it's not going to be the same way. At what point does innovation become not innovation? Because the Q&A, that's process. If you're not following a very well-defined process, you're probably it's going to break down. It's part of our human nature, which is why we incorporate systems to help create those controls and checkpoints, right? Innovation is it's saying, you know what, screw process. we're trying to explore and test and just discover and all this stuff, but I think there's a way to bring them both together. We can leverage process-based thinking, pattern-based behaviors, and you can still do discovery, exploration, trying on new things. I liked your intro. Is it Seth? Shim. I liked your intro when you guys were kind of walking through was it dice? Or I kind of missed the very beginning, but you guys were trying to go through the problem solving, the numbers. That there isn't really a right or wrong answer. It's just trying to figure out how you think. And man, that's one of the critical skills for building competency in innovation thinking. Is not being afraid to fail. Fail is not a bad thing. That's part of the process of how we develop understanding, wisdom. Well, hopefully we don't do the same thing twice, but the measure twice, cut once. If you're in woodworking, some kind of craft, that's going to be fatal in your project. But I think a lot of those concepts are pretty. They're helpful in how we start to bring all this together. So, okay. One more thing, and then I'm basically just going to walk you through kind of the practical steps for. It's not just problem solving, but it's how you can use it for projects, your business strategy, developing future state roadmaps, any of those things. But when you think about abundance, do you think is innovation more likely to occur when you have full access to all of the things that you need? Yeah. Is it more likely to happen then? Yes.
Yes, mother is necessity to mention, but it depends on the personality type, because if you have no fears, that's when some people can play, and they will create out of play.
True.
But more likely.
But human nature is fear. All right.
And again, this goes to kind of the philosophy debate in the industry. There are kind of two camps. It's the scarcity people and it's the abundance people. So, and this is, in the corporate environment, what's the first program that gets cut for funding? It's these special projects. Innovation tends to fall into that category. That's, R&D tends to be a little more, maybe not quite as, it doesn't fall all the way over in the category of innovation, but there's a lot of things that R&D is doing that's, definitely in that area. But, you might see projects that get cut out of those departments, at least in my experience. That's kind of the case. But, yeah, so it is kind of a question of, does it happen with abundance or is it scarce? So when we talk about scarcity, we're talking about the crisis moments. Has anybody ever been in a car accident? Life-threatening? No life-threatening? Any event that's life-threatening?
Life-threatening as in the damage we got, or life-threatening as in it could have?
I'm saying your situation was Yeah, you don't have to go into the story, but just, was there something that, when you're in the moment, the crisis, you're trying to assess, okay, now what do I do? Was there a moment that you're trying to figure out, I don't know if I'm going to make this?
I could tell that I was getting crushed, and I was falling towards something, and I could tell that the way I was falling, if the arc continued, I would probably break my back and my neck. And time slowed down, and I just saw the object getting closer and closer and closer, and then it flew away. It literally went, it was a ladder I was falling towards, and it went like 20 feet, hit a wall, nothing touched it, and then time sped up and I got smushed.
So there wasn't some...
There wasn't anything I personally could do, but I wasn't close enough to reach it yet. I would have been, but before I got even within arm's reach, as I was falling towards it, it went away.
Okay, maybe I'll try and that's a good example, and we'll come back to that. Let me try maybe a less serious one. Have you ever had to go to the bathroom so bad? I mean, so bad.
Yeah.
And you couldn't find a bathroom. What did you do? Who could not make it to a bathroom? Come on now.
Hold on.
Okay. What did you do? How did you solve that problem?
That depends.
Depends. That's an
I think it'd be fair to ask the
I mean, there's only a few options.
I gave up trying to hold it.
Okay, so were you in public?
No, not really, I guess. No.
Okay, so the risk probably wasn't too great.
No, I knew I was going to get made fun of by my sister, though.
Okay, well that, yeah.
So the risk was still, there was
some risk.
Yeah.
But you were willing to take it
Yeah.
because of the cost if you did not take immediate action.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean it's kind of corny, it is a corny example, but that's kind of what we're talking about. Is what do you do in a situation that is a crisis moment, and it's like you're reacting to the situation. You're not thinking through the plan. Oh, I got to go through my checklist. You're not writing down your test plan, right? You're reacting to it. Okay, so that's this side of the fence for those who believe in genuine innovation occurs at the moment of crisis. It's when you have no other options and you're in a corner. What are you going to do? It's the flight or fight response kind of a thing. I think there's room for both theories because I've seen both sides work. I've seen projects that, in my background, I've led, multi-million-dollar projects that are interstate, fairly large, high risk, people's jobs on the line kind of projects, and so, those were all funded. But I've also done a $7 million project that didn't have funding, and we were able to do what we needed to do without the full funding. So, I've kind of been on both sides of that. And then, of course, what I'm doing now, I don't have funding. Everything I'm doing right now is totally with zero funding. Everything. And I bought the equipment myself, and my wife and I have made some financial decisions on our own. But we don't have an investor. We don't have, sponsors or anything like that. So everything we're doing is this. And that's probably what I'll be eating tonight when I go home. But no, I think it's been a good exercise for me to kind of get a feel for both of them. When there's a lot riding on everything you have, and that's what it feels like. Sometimes, yeah, you're fully committed. You're all in. There's no, it's not really, if it doesn't work, it's still going. You're like, it has to work, and it will work. And there's no turning back. So sometimes I think we need to do that with our faith. Okay, so let's kind of shift gears, and we'll kind of get into the rest of our session here. And so I think I had 12. My goal is 12 minutes more, so it's almost 5 o'clock. I'm supposed to go till 5:30, but I was hoping that we didn't have to do that. But we can if you guys want to talk some more. But anyway, how do we take an idea from conception to operation? That's the question. Don't answer it. But you should have in your mind, okay, I'm going to do this, right? And so the more experience you have in your career, that becomes easier and easier. You're able to replicate those processes. Maybe your process is that you just wing it. it may not have to be a documented, formal project plan. It might just be something that you kind of, you know, you go off your gut feel. And another question is, how do we know which idea to pursue? Which one's going to have the most impact? And is there a way to kind of, you know, navigate that stuff? So I think that there is a way to get some cheat codes where we can kind of see, you know, the full map. And frankly, I mean, this is kind of what I did for a living for, you know, probably the last 15 years. Is doing this for executives, and it's amazing to me how many people that are in these billion-dollar organizations, they're, you know, C-level, VP level, and they don't. It's not really their area of expertise. So, you know, it's okay that most people don't. I mean, I didn't until I got into this particular field. You know, I had to be trained, and it took me, you know, quite a while to kind of get used to thinking this way. So it definitely was a mind shift for me. But now that I've done it and seen it and applied it and used it in scenarios that actually worked, it's like, oh wow, we need to be doing more of this. And so anyway, a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, we're applying in our innovation center. So we're actually teaching kids as young as 6 some of these concepts, and they're applying them to the things that they're doing. And so it's kind of cool to see. I'm still trying to figure out, you know, how deep we go with kids, because I'm not an educator by training, but it's kind of fun, you know, checking that out. So yeah, so I thought maybe we could just talk about giving you some tangible, practical guidance on how you not only choose which idea to pursue, but how do you execute it. And so when we go back to the conversation of innovation, because maybe it doesn't sound like we're talking about innovation anymore, we actually are. It really doesn't matter how good your idea is if you can't execute it. And so, anyway, yeah, you ever feel like this is what you've been given from your boss, or maybe maybe you're the boss and this is how you feel like you're given to your team, and so I've met a lot of folks that, you know, they struggle with that.
Sometimes I feel that's what I make it.
Yeah, same. Okay, so, you know, I've used this, like I said, I've used this with lots of different, you know, senior level executives, and, you know, hopefully it'll resonate with you guys, but I've had pretty good feedback. I used to host and facilitate strategic planning workshops for executive groups. And so, yeah, it just seemed like, man, we get into so much detail, and so I've really tried to, I probably spent about 5 years coming up with this simplified approach to it, and so I sort of use it as an accelerated strategy execution framework. That's what I've seen work well. But anyway, typically you have, you know, if you start over there on your left side, the strategies, you know, that would essentially be either the organizational, you know, core objectives, or whatever the language is that you're familiar with. And so those typically have to do with something related to quality, or maybe there's some efficiencies that a VP wants to see in his division, or and then of course customer value, or whatever it is. So, and over here, you know, those of you that are on the technical side, or maybe you're the person that's getting the assignments, hey, we need to solve this, go do this work, you're awesome at it. So you fall over in this category, and you're trying to attempt to meet their expectations and, you know, do all those great things that all of you are skilled in doing. I think the challenge is that sometimes I don't think that process works. It happens all over the world, and so, you know, hopefully these things down here resonate, and you can relate to, you know, the overly complex environment, things that take forever to get approval or funding. You know, you can't get a decision. Everybody wants to do their own thing with the competing priorities. The success rate is maybe not as extensive as it needs to be. And so I believe that the method that I'm going to show you will turn you into a dog. No, I'm serious.
You're serious?
This is as practical as I can make it, and I like I said, I've seen it work. So I will admit that it is part of the enterprise architecture way of thinking, which is kind of my background. So that's kind of how all this has come about. But I kind of feel like my career has been my test lab to kind of figure out some of these theories. And so these are the 3 areas. If there's anything you take away from what I've said, these are the 3 things that if you have anything to do with project deliverables, strategic planning, running your business, working with a key sponsor about, they're saying, hey, can you help us solve this issue? You need to be thinking about these 3 things, okay? So the planning framework, I don't think it really matters. There's lots of planning frameworks out there. I personally believe that enterprise architecture as an industry is, which is sort of an emerging field, right? Project management's been around for over 100 years. Some would say that it's been around for centuries, but the pyramids were built with project plans. I don't know, but EA has been around for maybe 20, 25. That's debatable. I think it's probably been closer to 15, but different organizations have different definitions of what enterprise architecture is. But my point is that whatever the framework is, you just need to have some kind of a set system that is kind of your baseline. It's how you do things, it's where you get your processes. Maybe there's some documents that go with it, and it doesn't matter what you call it. You just want to make sure you're always going back to the same source. Okay. The second one is your future state. Now this is probably the simplest but most important thing that you would want to do first. You always start with your future state. Never start with your current state. Have you ever heard of current state gap analysis? Those things. It's basically saying, and if you ever work with a project manager, they're going to talk about gap analysis and current state. They very rarely talk about future state. And I fundamentally believe that this is why we have those missing, the dots on the previous slide where those arrows aren't quite making the mark. But the future state is I have some guiding questions. These are probing questions down here at the bottom. It's what are the things that we must do tomorrow that we can't do today? That's the first one. What things should we be doing that we can't do today? And then the last one, which is also a very rich, deep meaning question, is what are the things we need to stop doing? And most companies don't look at that. They never talk about what are we going to get rid of. We're going to bring in this new system. We're going to deploy this new project. It's going to be awesome. It's going to solve all of our problems. But they'll never get rid of their old systems. And so you always want to be thinking of the stopping doing things. Okay, so future state, that's essential in this approach. And then the second one is, okay, once we've defined our future state, what do we have to get us there? Okay, so that's basically what we would call the current state. It's looking at, here's the things I can do right now. I can do this, 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 this. Here's how well they perform. These ones work really awesome. We don't need to do anything with those, great, set them aside. This one, we don't even know what it is, but we're pretty sure that it does what we think it needs to do. We just have to figure out how to use it. So you kind of have this thing of, what do we have today that we can use to get us to the future state, right? How well do we use them? How often are they, let's see, how well do they perform? How often are they used? How much do they cost? How much value do they create? And then of course you have what are the things that are missing what are the things we don't have in place right now that we need to be able to execute this future state vision, this grand plan of who we want to be when we grow up. Now I think that this same thing that we've just talked about, you could apply it to a game project. I mean, one of the questions, so I would consider myself a consumer of games, and most of you would be the people creating the games. I have never had someone ask me, what kind of game do you want? What's the game that you think is missing from the marketplace? I've never had anybody ask me that. And so that's kind of what we're talking about, is the future state is, you know, kind of being mindful of whoever your core customers are, or if you're a church, what are the things who are you trying to serve? And there's all different ways you can do this, but anyway, that's kind of the idea there with the capabilities. Now, this isn't talking about the how. This is the what. That's what a capability is. So just so we're clear on that. Any questions on that piece?
So would you describe the future state as, I've heard it in more churchy settings, as sort of casting a vision, I guess, in a sense, where it's like, this is what we need to do, this is what we need to do.
Sure, yeah. No, that would be part of the future state. I mean, it really is just, you know, who do you want to be when you grow up? What's your, you know, it would be, doesn't have to just be a time. It doesn't have to just be long term. It might be a near term. But yeah, the visioning, it's fairly, you know, articulated. So it's not vague concepts, but it's something like, look, we need to be able to, you know, provide this ministry program to this demographic. That's a future state. Okay, so what are the capabilities we have to have in place to be able to do that? If we want to do a church plant, okay, great. We're going to have 4 churches in our region, and our region spans this space. And so we got to have, you know, we got to have the ability to manage our finances. That would be a capability. It's not talking about the solutions. It's not talking about the technology. That's a capability. What do we have to have in place? Not how we're going to do it. Okay? So once you get through the future state and your capability assessment, then you can start dealing with the hows and, you know, when and who's going to be involved and all those things. I'm just showing you this. I'm going to give you an example, just kind of walk you through this. But I am showing you a framework, okay? And this is an enterprise execution framework. So over on the far right, now this on Thursday I mentioned that there was a good idea about gamifying the patient experience for kids with chronic illness. So I shared a little bit how we were looking at gamifying that whole experience, where kids would earn points for taking their blood sugar 4 times a day, and they could, you know, check their weight every day and all these things, right? Okay, great idea. And so we made it to, this is the opportunity assessment, the future state and vision. Here's what we're trying to achieve out of this whole idea. Here's the outcomes we're looking for. And so we've gone through that. You know, some people like the SWOT analysis, which is, you know, your strengths, weakness, opportunities, threats. There's another one here that I've used in the past. Anyway, my point is that you kind of go through this journey, but sometimes you end up kind of, you know, you kind of float through these conversations with people as you're trying to gain buy-in, trying to figure out, okay, well, you know what, now that we've been thinking about it, we probably need to go back and redefine what we thought was our future state plan. Let's maybe reshape that a little bit. And so the further you get on, then you move into, you know, this is like your approval stage, where you got the financial plan and your, you know, all your operating budget laid out and all those things. And now you're kind of moving into the execution phase, which is your project management, and kind of laying out your times and your, you know, who does what tasks and what are your deadlines and your milestones and all those things. And then as you get into the operations, that's where you're live on a system. Maybe you're selling a game product, and you know, you're going to be doing life cycle management with your release, software releases and updates and all those things. So this probably shouldn't be horizontal, probably needs to be more of a circular view of it, but it's just kind of giving you an example that you always got to start with that future state, because if you jump into the solutions here, it's just not going to work. And that's where I think organizations really find themselves in some challenges there. So we talked about future state first, capability second, okay? When you have your capabilities, now you can prioritize much more quickly. Your planning framework is very closely knitted into the way that you're preparing your execution, so that your rework is reduced, but it all revolves around your capabilities. Your capabilities don't change, they don't go away. Now if your business model changes, then you go back and you redefine your capabilities. But this stays, it's persistent, which is why these solutions change. People turn over, you got different technologies that come in, you're constantly training people, right? So this stuff is always changing. And so the people that don't focus on their core capabilities, that's where they find themselves in these situations where, well, they can't innovate, which is why we're having this conversation. And so, anyway, so this is the last slide, but so with our innovation center, really, like I said, we're still waiting for our final approval on our application, but our goal is to basically set this up as a kind of it's an opportunity. People don't have to be part of a church. This is not a religious institution. We want churches to be a religious institution. It's just that our projects happen to be faith-based. Every project we do is directly tied to the core mission of the church, but it doesn't really have anything to do with who we are in terms of people on the outside, if I can say it that way. Does that make sense? So basically, the kids that participate, we got workshops that we're doing. They're observing and participating that way, and then hands-on stuff where they're actually involved in the projects. But all of our projects are real live projects. They're not in a closed lab. A lot of innovation centers for kids, like robotics classes, maybe the software engineering classes that they teach. Those things are all closed lab, almost over 90% of them. And so we're trying to do something different that actually gives kids an opportunity to participate in real things. They have real consequences and they have real impact in a positive way. So not just the bad stuff, but we want kids to be part of that. And so we think that's where our focus is on. And then over here is our for-profit company, and so that's where we do consulting and things like that. And so we haven't actually had. I have 3 potential clients, but basically when they hire our consulting group, they're agreeing to having 2, maybe 3 juniors or seniors in high school that would participate in every one of those activities. So strategic planning sessions, helping build the deliverables for those. So that's kind of the model that you're seeing here. But you just see you have kind of a general understanding. And so there's my contact info. It's kind of hard to see, I guess. I can give that to you if you can't see it. But so I'm 8 minutes over my goal, so I guess that wasn't too bad. But does anybody have any questions or feedback? All right. Well, thanks for.
Are you willing to work with a small company?
Oh yeah, I work with people all the time. A lot of it's pro bono, but